we dive into the depths of darkness and this chilling tale. If you enjoy these mysterious journeys, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to join the Night Tales family. Also, if you have your own unexplained stories, share them with us in the comments. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. Are you sure the door behind you is closed right now? Celine thought it was over when she survived that terrifying night at the camp and returned home. That was until the last photo appeared. On her phone, a photo taken in her own living room while she was sitting on the couch, and in the shadowed dot of the bedroom door behind her, that pale face waiting. Today's story isn't just about a camping trip. It's about a shadow that watches you, comes home with you, and never leaves. Wente sighed, it's much easier to watch you at your own home. It was already too late. It was the last days of September. The sky had taken on a gray, cracked hue, like the scab of a dried wound. Mert, at the wheel of his trusty Jeep, drove along the dirt road winding deep into the forest, glancing in the rear view at his friends. There were 5 of them. 5 young people, bound together by the unbreakable dog ties of high school, trying to escape the city's noise. They hadn't yet realized that this journey was not only an escape from the city, but from the world they don't knew. Arda, are you sure this is the right road? Selin asked, her voice competing with the wind whistling. Through the window, Arda straightened the old-fashioned paper map in his hands and grinned. You won't find this place online. An old friend of my father told me about it. No one comes here. It's perfect to clear your head. There's a lake, and its water is like a mirror. The road narrowed as the trees' tangled branches closed in. Light filtered through the leaves, but seemed to die before touching the ground, leaving the surroundings imprisoned in a twilight gray. The 2-hour drive stretched into what felt like a timeless void. At last, the trees thinned, and the view opened before them. The lake was carved into the forest like a crater. Its water was black, motionless, and eerie. When Mert parked the Jeep on a flat patch near the shore, a heavy silence fell over them with the engine stopping. It was not a peaceful silence. It was a deafening void, as if nature itself were holding its breath, waiting for someone to arrive. Strange, Zeynep said as she opened the door. The air is warm, but my hairs are standing on end. The campfire stood like a trembling orange fortress in the midst of darkness. As Bora cracked the firewood, the flames painted the 5 friends' faces and cast huge, distorted shadows behind them. Marshmallows were toasted, old memories were shared, laughter erupted. But as the night progressed, the forest began to speak a different language. The rhythmic chirping of crickets, frog croaks, and nocturnal bird calls that one would normally hear in a forest were absent. There was only a thin, whistle-like rustle of the wind moving through the treetops. Did you notice? Zeynep whispered, her gaze fixed on the dark tree line, away from the fire. Not a single insect sound. Not one. Bora laughed weakly to break the tension. Maybe they all ran away, scared of Arda's snoring. No one laughed. Mert's gaze shifted to the lake. Under the moonlight, it glimmered like an oil spill. There's wind, Mert said, his voice faltering. Look, the branches are swaying. Our hair is moving. But on the lake, not a single ripple. The water is dead. At that moment, it felt as if thousands of eyes from the lake's bottom were watching them. Celine and Zeynep shivered and retreated to their tents. The boys waited until the last embers of the fire died. Around 3 a.m., Celine's sleep was abruptly cut. She thought she saw a shadow against the nylon wall of the tent. Someone was walking outside, but their steps didn't touch the ground. They seemed to glide over the leaves with trembling hands. She slowly unzipped the tent, inch by inch. Outside, the scene was like a nightmare bathed in the pale light of the moon. Ashes from the extinguished fire floated in the air. At the very edge of the lake, where the water ended and darkness began, a figure stood. It was extremely tall, extremely thin, and completely still. Facing away from the campsite, Selin whispered, her voice caught in her throat. No answer. The figure continued to gaze at the lake like a statue, driven by an indescribable mix of curiosity and fear. Selin stepped out of the tent. The dry twigs snapped under her feet, echoing like an explosion in the silence. At that moment, the figure slowly turned its head. Its face was not fully visible, but the emptiness in its eyes penetrated Selin's soul. The man looked at her for a single second. Then, without hurry, as if taking an evening stroll, Banisadinto, the forest, silently, like a ghost. By morning, when Celine recounted what she had seen, the group split in two. Bora tried to dismiss it, saying, "You must have dreamed it." But Ardas's unease was evident. The idea of leaving in the car lingered in the air until Mert noticed the map in the jeep's glove compartment. Now on the ground, with handprints and dried mud, silence became permanent. Someone had entered this jeep during the night and had only watched. "Let's go for a walk," Arda suggested. "Maybe there's a house or another camper nearby." As they moved into the forest, they noticed the path growing older, as if no human had set foot there for years. In the middle of the path, they found the remnants of a fire, smoke still rising. Mert? Stope. The ashes were gray, and they carried a fresh scent. "Someone is watching us," Selin whispered, her eyes locked on the impenetrable darkness among the trees. "I can feel it." When they returned to the campsite, the wind had completely died. The lake was again perfectly still. Sitting around the fire for dinner, no one spoke until Zeynep noticed something on the opposite shore. "There," she said, pointing. On the far side of the lake, a silhouette appeared. Then another. Then another. None of them shouted or threatened. They simply stood. "Hey!" Arda called, his voice echoing over the lake, but there was no answer. "Look behind us," Mert said, his voice barely more than a rasp. Through the trees, dozens more had emerged from the darkness. A circle was closing in. They weren't running, only stepping forward. Slow, solemn, and inevitable. Their faces were chalk white, and not one of them blinked. To the cara. Now, all five scrambled into the jeep. When Mert turned the key, the engine roared to life. As the car skidded along the dirt road, Selin looked out the rear window. What she saw was not a crowd of humans, but the forest itself. Hundreds of silhouettes stood still in the dust cloud illuminated by the headlights, watching their departure like statues. None chased them. It was as if they already knew they couldn't escape. By the time they reached the city, the sun was about to rise. Even the concrete buildings under the street lights felt unsafe. Everyone went home, but no one slept. The next evening, Selin's phone rang sharply. It was Mert. "Selin, did you look at the photos?" Mert's voice trembled. "What photos?" "Last night. The ones I took by the fire." "Look at them, please." With trembling fingers, Selin opened her gallery. Then she found the photo of them sitting by the fire, Bora laughing in the frame. She zoomed in. Behind Bora, at shoulder height, a hand hovered pale and slightly above, at the very edge of the darkness, that expressionless face, watching the fire with them. Mert, who is this? It's worse, Selin. Look at the angle of the photo. I was there at that moment. Not the King Italiano, but this photo. It's Dot, as if it was taken from inside the lake, directly across from the fire. Selen's phone vibrated again. At this time, a message from an unknown number. It was a photo file. When she opened it, her heart nearly stopped. It was the living room they had just been in, photographed from the dark corridor behind her. In the photo, Selen sat on the couch with the phone to her ear, but right behind her, in the shadow of Dot, the wide-open bedroom door, stood that same tall figure from the campsite. Selen slowly turned her head. The air inside the room instantly filled with the scent of the forest where they camped, rotting leaves and stagnant water. She heard those familiar, silent footsteps coming from the corridor. The last line under the message lit up her screen. They're not just watching. Selen dropped her phone when she noticed the pale hand stretching toward her from the darkness. The only sound now was Mert's desperate screams through the open phone line. Selen's fingers froze on the cold screen. Mert's voice. Dot on the other end sounded like a distant hum. Her eyes were fixed on the last photo from the unknown number. It had been taken seconds ago, from the dark corridor directly behind the chair where she sat. On the screen, she saw her back, the phone in her hand, and familiar items in the room. But the most terrifying part was the tall, pale silhouette standing at the edge of the half-open bedroom door. The man from the Dot forest was there, seeping into the corridor's shadow like a stain. Selen slowly, with joints creaking. Dot turned her head backward. The air inside the room shifted instantly. The warmth of the modern house vanished, replaced by the damp, decayed leaves and stagnant water smell of the cursed lake. In the pitch-black corridor, the same Dot silhouette from the photo remained. Moonlight didn't reach the corridor, but the man's chalk-white Dot face seemed to create its own darkness. The man had no eyes. Only his gaze existed, without blinking. Dot, without showing any emotion. He stared at Selen. She wanted to scream, but her throat felt as if gripped by a hand. The man stepped forward slowly, almost motionless. His lips did not move, yet the sound echoed simultaneously from the walls, the furniture, and deep within Selen's mind. The cold whisper cut through the silence like a knife. It was nice watching you by the campfire, but watching you in your home is much easier. Selen's phone slipped from her hand onto the carpet.